In this video, I'm going to be showing the installation of the railing post for this cantilever deck rebuild project. I'm going to show how I attach the post to both a masonry brick wall as well as the wood decking framing itself. And I'm also going to show a trick to make sure that these railing posts stay in a nice straight line, so stick around. In the previous video, I described how I was going to rebuild this deck and started the project by fixing and capping the existing framing boards. Feel free to watch that video as well. I had to install structural railing posts less than 4 feet apart the length of the deck. The first post was to be attached to the brick wall using masonry anchor hardware. These bolts had to be in a precise location not to interfere with the cable railing hardware. So I started by making a template with a scrap 2x4. Holes were pre-drilled in the accurate locations, and then I placed the template in position on the wall. I drilled a bit to make a mark for the first hole, and then, using a hammer drill with a masonry bit, drilled the depth of the first hole deep enough for the anchor wedge bolt to be installed. Then I temporarily placed the bolt backwards through the top hole of the template to hold the template to the wall. This allowed me to position the template in a proper plumb position before drilling the hole for the second anchor bolt. Next, I partially set the anchors by tapping them into the holes using a hammer with nuts on the starting threads to help minimize any possible thread damage from the tapping. At this point, the anchors already felt solid. Then I placed a pre-drilled 4x4 made using the same template over the bolts and persuaded the post into position using the hammer. I added a washer and nut to each bolt and then tapped them even deeper into the wall to maximize the anchoring strength. Then I used a socket wrench to seat the wedge anchors and firmly secure the post into position. Next, I attached mason string to the top outside edge of the post and ran it to the end post on the other side of the deck. Then I ran the line from the top of the corner post back to the top of the first post. These two strings would enable me to set the proper height and alignment for the remaining railing post. For this project, I used 4x4 pressure treated post. After marking for length, I used a speed square to mark a cut line on one side of the post. Then I transferred that line to 3 more sides of the post. I then set my saw blade to the max cutting depth, which is not enough to cut through the post in one cut. After the first cut, I turned the post over and made another cut on my other traced line. By cutting 8-foot posts in half, I ended up with 2 posts per cut. Before attaching the post to the deck framing, I decided to beef up the framing where the posts were to be attached. I simply scabbed on another 2x10 to do this. Notice this little triangle scrap board. I have it temporarily attached to help hold this board in place, as well as a place to set the post on when I go to attach it. Now I could set my post on a temporary ledge and set it in proper position. The goal was to line it up with both string lines and then make minor adjustments to keep the post plumb. In some cases, I needed to use shims. Then I tacked the post in the proper position using a couple of deck screws. To make the connection to the deck framing solid, I used 1/2-inch galvanized carriage bolts and needed to drill holes through the framing and the post to install the hardware. Then I was able to tap the bolts into place and add washers and nuts before tightening. I set each post in this fashion, and thanks to the guidelines, I ended up with perfectly oriented rail post. Next, I was to install the top railing boards in between the post. To do this, I placed dry 2x6 pressure treated boards on top of the post and traced cut lines using the post tops as a scribe. To accommodate for any irregularities in the post, I had to adjust the angle of the saw accordingly to cut along the scribed lines. These boards would be attached by toenailing screws into the boards and post. I pre-drilled for the holes and then marked the center location on top of the railing board. I also marked for center of the rail post and then loosely set my screws to ease the one-man installation. Before inserting the rail, I added a temporary holding screw to hold one side of the rail board up, kind of serving like an extra set of hands. I set the board into position, lining up my center lines, and then carefully screwed the board in position. I repeated this process for each of the railing boards. Now, worth mentioning is installing the boards in between the posts like this will help offset compressive forces from the cable railing system. Basically, this will help keep the corner post from bending over because the rails will transfer the load all the way over to the opposing wall. I hope you found this video insightful, and if so, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And also, if interested in the future videos for this deck rebuild project, consider subscribing and hitting the notification button. And thanks for watching. I'm Joe Kistel.